Theatrical Shenanigans Law and Order series, Episode 3. Hello there and welcome to our third episode in our Law and Order series here on Theatrical Shenanigans. This week we have a play called A Few Questions. In it we see 60-year-old Jessie Burrows and her son have been brought in for questioning in relation to 16 bodies that have been discovered under her old house, the location of her husband who abandoned her, and a possible connection between the two. Theatrical Shenanigans presents A Few Questions by Rachel Feeney Williams.
Right this way, Mrs. Burrows. Please, have a seat, Mrs. Burrows.
Oh, thank you, dear. Very kind and polite.
Nothing really, part of the job.
I don't think so, dear. You'll be amazed how many people I speak to every day who wouldn't know decent manners if it smacked them on the bottom.
Oh, my mother always used to tell me that manners didn't cost anything.
A very wise woman.
Do you actually plan to ask questions, Detective? Or is the aim of this meeting just to waste my mother's time?
Now, Christopher. The detective has a job to do.
And you have a life to get back to.
Oh, don't be silly. There's only an episode of This Morning waiting for me.
Well then, I won't keep you any longer than I need to, Mrs. Burrows.
Please, dear. Call me Jessie.
Very well, Jessie. Can we get you a cup of tea or coffee before we start?
For goodness sake!
Christopher, you mind your manners. Yes, please, dear. A cup of tea, milk and 2 sugars.
Right away. Sergeant?
Sir?
Could you get Mrs. Jessie here a cup of tea with milk and 2 sugars?
No problem, sir.
Anything for you, sir?
No, thank you.
That's all then, Sergeant.
Right away, sir.
We'll just wait for the sergeant and then we can get started.
I want it noted that my mother is here simply as a courtesy and against my advice.
And we appreciate it, Mr. Chapman.
I'm only here to make sure she doesn't get railroaded.
Railroaded, sir?
Please. You see a woman my mother's age and think she's a doddering old lady that you can fire questions at to trick into saying anything.
I assure you, sir, that's not our intention.
Well,
Christopher! I know you have good intentions, dear, but I would appreciate it if you didn't talk about me as though I weren't here.
Mother, you...
The detective isn't going to pounce on me, are you, detective?
Certainly not, Jessie.
There you are, see? Nothing to fret about.
Well...
Ah, here's the tea. Here's your tea, Jessie.
Oh, thank you kindly, dear. Oh, biscuits!
My gran always said you can't have tea without biscuits.
Another wise woman. No biscuit for you, detective?
Afraid not, Jessie. My wife has me on a bit of a diet. She's worried about my health a bit.
Well, that's sweet that she cares.
Can we get on with this?
Christopher, there is no need for that sort of...
No, he's quite right, Jessie. For the benefit of the tape, I am Detective Rains.
And I am Sergeant Clayton.
Interviewing Mrs. Jessie Burrows with her solicitor and son, Mr. Christopher Chapman, present. The time is 9:15am on Wednesday the 15th of May, 2018. Do you recognise the house in this picture, Jessie?
Oh, that's the garden of my old house at Haddon Gardens. Oh, it was such a lovely place it was too. I miss it sometimes.
When did you leave the house, Mrs. Burrows?
About 5 years ago or so now, dear.
Do you mind if I ask why?
I don't see why that is relevant.
It's all right, Christopher. Oh, it's a big place, detective, and there's just a lot of painful memories there.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I assume you have a reason for asking about my mother's former home, Detective.
As a matter of fact, I do, sir.
Oh, no! Oh!
Good!
Oh!
God!
Oh, what are those? Oh.
I'm sorry to upset you, Jessie.
I should bloody well think so.
That's really not necessary, sir.
Your colleague has reduced my mother to tears, Sergeant. I think there is every need.
You asked why I was asking the questions, Mr. Chapman. I was simply showing why.
Oh, yes, and those pictures were necessary to do that, were they?
Unfortunately for your mother, sir, yes, they are. It's all right, Jessie. I've put the picture away again now.
What was that?
The recent new owners of the house dug up the patio for some renovations a few days ago. That's what they found.
16 bodies of young men between 18 and 25.
Oh no, my lord, I can't.
Wait a moment. You're not suggesting my mother had anything to do with this?
We're just trying to establish what happened, sir. Jessie, can you tell us about your life in that house?
This is ridiculous!
Is there something you need to tell us, sir?
If you want the culprit for these horrible deaths, Detective, then you...
Christopher, no!
Mum, you cannot keep protecting him.
Protecting who, Mrs. Burrows?
Oh. My Jack.
Your husband.
No, her live-in lover.
Mr. Chapman, that really isn't helping matters.
Will you...
Mr. Chapman! All we want to do is ask your mother a couple of questions, then let her go home. I'd never want to upset her more than I have to, but there are questions that we need answering.
Fine.
Go on, Jessie.
Well, Jack and I met in 1982. He was a mechanic in the garage down the road. I remember thinking he was so handsome and so clever. He could make any engine do what he wanted. When he asked me out, I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. We married the following year.
When did you buy the Haddon Gardens house?
Oh, about 5 years after we'd been married. Just after Christopher was born. It was such a beautiful space. I felt like a princess with my own castle and then I...
Jessie, were you afraid of Jack?
Of course she was.
I'd like to hear it from her, Mr. Chapman.
Well, Jack was a good man, but he...
Yes?
Oh, well, he worked such long hours and he was so stressed all the time. And when he was stressed, he drank. Oh dear. I remember the first time he hit me. It was such a shock. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there and he laughed at me. Told me I was a fool and that he'd only married me so I'd clean his house and raise his babies. Oh dear.
Were you ever suspicious of his behaviour, Jessie?
Well,
It's all right, Jessie. You're safe here.
Well, Jack and I, we only, a handful of times.
I see.
Once Christopher was born, he never touched me at all. He just stayed out all night, and when he came home, he hid himself away.
Where would he hide?
Well, in the garage, mostly. Oh dear. I thought it was another woman at first, but then I saw them.
Who?
Jack. He came home from the pub one night and he was with this young fella. Oh no. They were kissing. I felt such a fool.
Did you confront your husband?
Oh no, not then. I felt such an idiot. I couldn't admit to myself that he didn't love me at all.
When did you confront him?
Christopher was about 5. He'd been out late, and when he came home, he was drunk. I told him that I knew what he was, and I was leaving him.
How did he react to that?
He flung me across the room into the stairs. I saw Christopher at the top of the stairs. Oh, God, I never wanted him to see his father like that.
Did you witness any of this, sir?
Oh, I remember that my father was an abusive bastard, Sergeant. The best thing he ever did was leaving my mother.
When was that?
Well, not for years afterwards. He said he'd never let me leave. He needed me so he could keep up with his lies. Oh, I never thought they were lies this bad.
Sorry to ask this again, Jessie, but do you know what year your husband ran away?
2008. I got a call while I was at university. Mother was in tears, saying my father had left her. He should have done the decent thing and left sooner.
Did you ever see him after he left, Jessie?
Nothing. Oh, it sounds so stupid now, but I thought he would come back to us, but no, I heard nothing. I don't know what I'd have done without Christopher.
What do you mean by that?
After my father left, my mother was really struggling. She'd never worked, so without his income, the bills piled up. I chose to come home to help out with the bills. I remained at home to study until I was qualified.
He worked himself to a frazzle. We both did. But after 5 years, I just accepted that Jack wasn't coming back, and I moved on. Oh, no, I just can't believe that he would...
Jessie, we greatly appreciate you coming in and answering our questions. I just have one more question, if I may.
Yes, of course, Detective.
Do you know of any friends or family your husband would have gone to when he left you?
Well, I did call his mother after he left, but she'd not heard from him, and I didn't really know his friends. I'm sorry, Detective.
That's all right, Jessie. You've been very helpful.
I trust I can take my mother home now, Detective.
Of course. No problem, and thank you both.
Mind if I take a biscuit for the road, dear?
Not a problem at all.
Thank you, dear. Such a long way home.
Come along, Mother.
It was very nice to meet you both.
Oh, pleasure, Mrs. Burrows.
Jessie, dear. Always Jessie.
An officer would have caught you both out. And once again, thank you for coming in.
So, what do you think, sir?
There's nothing to think. You heard what the pathologist said. None of those bodies was less than 10 years old. That ties in with when the husband left.
You think she really had no idea?
That heartbreak is difficult to fake in my experience.
So, what do we do now?
We start hunting for Jack Burrows. Someone must have been in contact with him. Then, maybe we can get this case closed.
Where have you gone now?
Hold your horses, I'm just changing.
Well. Hello, Mummy.
Oh, leave off with that mummy talk. It makes me feel ill.
It worked though, didn't it?
That's because you, my darling, played the doting and overprotective son perfectly.
Well, you gave a pretty Oscar-worthy performance yourself. I almost believed you.
It's not difficult. The helpless, battered woman routine had them eating out of the palm of my hand. And now they will go looking for Jack.
Just like you planned, my gorgeous genius. You really are a beautifully brilliant woman, you know.
I know. Would have been mine and Jack's 35th wedding anniversary next month.
Shall we celebrate?
Oh, seems a bit tactless, don't you think?
But we could recreate the night we met. It would be perfect, don't you think?
Oh, yes. It's definitely a favourable option.
I remember that night like it was yesterday. There's only one thing I regret, though.
Oh, yes?
That I wasn't there for all of it. To appreciate your genius.
Oh, flatterer.
Tell me again.
You know the story.
Please.
All right. All right. But you are going to have to release me.
Sport.
And you can get me a drink.
As my lady commands. Your refreshment, my lady?
Just how I like it.
I believe a certain story was promised.
Oh, you always were a determined young man.
Just how you like me.
Well, once I realised what a bastard Jack was, I started preparing to leave him. But then I fell pregnant with my son. The night I told Jack, he flew into a rage and beat me black and blue. My son and whatever love I had for Jack died that night.
I'd have slaughtered him for you then and there.
Oh, I thought about it. But I'd heard what happened to women in prison, and I wasn't prepared to suffer that fate. So I started finding other amusements.
Those men you said you saw Jack with.
All my own little toys. Men no one would miss. Oh, I remember being with them in the garage, feeling so dirty, but so free at the same time. Oh, the feeling when the knife went across their throat was just, perfect. And then, my darling, I met you, my 17th victim.
I can hardly believe it's been 10 years. I knew the moment I saw that passion in your eyes when you approached me with that knife that I loved you.
You were awfully lucky that Jack came home. I was all set to slice you open.
But instead, I got to make that kill for you.
I'd no idea that you'd broken free. Naughty boy.
I love nothing more than being naughty with you, my dear.
Darling, we shouldn't neglect our guest.
Of course.
Perfect.
That was A Few Questions by Rachel Fooney Williams, with Gilly Fick as Jessie Burrows, Andy Duncan as Chris Chapman, Kareem Confley as Detective Rains, and Chris Plumbridge as Sergeant Clayton. Theatrical Shenanigans is part of an RFW Scripts production, found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts and Podbean. Theme music is written and produced by Chris Cody.